What happens when the man who signs the paychecks picks strawberries next to the people who can't afford lunch? Graham Ellis stared out the window of his pickup truck, watching a crew of workers move slowly across the field rows, backs bent under the morning sun. He kept his baseball cap low and the flannel shirt untucked. His beard was grown out, and he wore an old pair of boots caked with dust. No one would recognize him like this not here. 7 years ago, Graham bought the family-run farm chain from an aging owner who wanted out. 8 locations across the state, each running their own seasonal crews. Graham had taken pride in keeping things personal, but as the business grew, so did the distance between him and the dirt. Recently, complaints started trickling in. Not formal ones, just things said offhand during meetings. High turnover, delayed equipment repairs, a few mentions of crew members quitting mid-season. His district manager, Miles, assured him everything was fine. Farming's hard work, he'd said. People come and go. But Graham knew better. Numbers don't lie, but they don't always show the whole truth either. He picked Store 6 for his visit, a mid-size farm outside Bakersfield. He'd never been to this one himself. None of the crew had met him in person. The location manager, a guy named Rick, didn't know what he looked like either. Graham had only ever dealt with Miles when it came to field ops. He signed up with a fake name Nate through a temp agency the farm partnered with. A week later, he was handed a sun hat, gloves, and a tiny folding stool and told to follow the others. No paperwork from Rick, no safety briefing, just keep up or you're gone. By mid-morning, Graham's back screamed. The sun was brutal, even through the brim of his hat. He kept his head down and worked beside a woman who looked no older than 20. Her hands moved fast, and she barely spoke. He noticed she gave half her water bottle to the guy next to her without saying a word. At lunch, Rick showed up. Big guy, aviators, loud voice. 10-minute break, that's it, he shouted. Anyone sits longer, don't bother coming back. Graham sat under a thin tree, chewing on a granola bar. The girl from earlier, the one who shared her water, walked past him with nothing in her hands. She sat on the dirt, leaned against her knees, and stared at the ground. He walked over. Hey, you good? She looked up startled. Yeah, hey, just resting. You didn't bring food. She hesitated. Nah, I'm fine. I eat when I get home. Graham didn't believe her. He offered her the rest of his granola bar. She smiled, shook her head, and looked away. After lunch, they moved to the southern rows. The soil was looser here, harder to walk on. The sun dipped lower, but somehow it felt hotter. When someone twisted an ankle behind them, Rick didn't even slow down. Just shouted, "Get someone to take her spot." By the end of the day, Graham's arms were jelly. His shirt stuck to his back. As the crew clocked out, Rick barked orders from the porch of the office. 12-hour shift tomorrow, be early, no shows will be replaced. Graham waited until Rick went inside before turning to the girl again. You got a ride. She looked up surprised. I walk, it's not far. Can I walk with you? He asked. She hesitated. Sure, if you want. They walked in silence for a while, passing dry fields and rusted fences. Finally, she said, My name's Gianna. Nate, he replied. They turned down a gravel road that led to a row of trailers. Most were old, patched with sheet metal or blue tarps. She stopped at the third one. The door hung crooked. A child's drawing was taped to the window. You live here? He asked. Gianna nodded. Me and my son, just us. You don't have air conditioning. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. No, we leave the door open at night. Sometimes it helps. Graham stared at the trailer. The roof sagged. The steps were broken. There was no way this place was safe. I thought the company helped with housing, he said without thinking. Gianna gave him a look. Not here. Rick says we're on our own. I asked about it once. He told me if I didn't like it, could leave. Graham went quiet, his stomach turned. Before he could speak, a small voice came from inside. Mama. Gianna's face lit up. I'm here, baby. A boy, maybe 5, poked his head out. I made you a picture. She took it with both hands, kissed his forehead. It's beautiful, Oren. Graham swallowed hard. Gianna, how long have you been working here? 3 seasons, I do what can. He looked at the trailer again, then at her hands calloused, cracked, and the boy's bare feet. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. She nodded, stepping inside with Oren. Graham turned and walked back down the gravel road, his heart pounding. He didn't just feel tired, he felt ashamed. All this time, he thought he knew what his company stood for. But this wasn't it. He pulled out his phone once he reached his truck. Miles, he said when the call connected. Don't tell anyone yet, but I'm at store 6, and we have a serious problem. The next morning, Graham arrived earlier than anyone else. He parked a mile away and walked in under the same sky that was already beginning to burn. His gloves were still damp from the day before, and the muscles in his legs protested every step. He passed the crew lot and noticed a dented white van idling with the back doors open. Inside, 6 workers sat shoulder to shoulder on a folded tarp. No words, just nods. Rick's truck pulled in 20 minutes later, kicking up dust as it screeched to a stop. He climbed out with a half-eaten breakfast sandwich and a clipboard, barking something at one of the younger guys near the shed. The kid jogged off. Graham joined the foreman group. Every face looked like it had aged a year overnight. Most wore the same clothes as yesterday. One man had duct tape wrapped around his boot sole. No one spoke unless spoken to. Rick clapped his hands. All right, listen up, we're behind quota. If we don't beat yesterday's numbers, I start cutting shifts. Fast rowers get to stay, slow ones don't care where you go. He pointed at a line of red flags. Rows are marked, you know the drill, let's go. No safety reminders, no hydration plan, just pressure. Graham was assigned to a group with a new team lead, a short, wiry man named Hector with a sharp eye and a quiet voice. Hector didn't say much, but he checked on everyone's technique, offered tips, and worked twice as fast as anyone else. You're pushing too deep, he said to Graham quietly. Skim the surface, your back will thank you. Graham nodded. How long have you been doing this? 8 years, Hector didn't look up. I tried to quit once, came back, pays better than the warehouse. They worked in silence for an hour. Then a shout came from 3 rows over. Move it, Rick's voice cracked across the field. I said no breaks. A woman had paused to tie her shoe. Rick stood over her, arms crossed. You want to sit, go home. She looked up startled. I'm just... Don't care, Rick snapped. That's one warning. Next time you're off the list. Graham clenched his jaw. Hector kept his head down. By noon, the heat had turned cruel. Someone dropped their basket. Another gagged in the dirt. A few workers huddled under a shade net for 5 minutes before Rick stormed over and tore it down. This is not a picnic, he shouted. You want shade, work faster. No one responded, they just moved. During the lunch break, Graham sat near Hector beneath a rusted water tank. They shared a single orange between them. Hector peeled it slowly, careful not to waste a drop. You ever think of leaving? Graham asked, voice low. Hector looked at him. Every day. Why stay? His answer was simple. Because if I leave, my brother loses his kidney meds. He's on my insurance. Graham stared at the orange peel in his hands. It felt like holding something fragile and wrong. Rick ever help you out? He asked. Hector shook his head. Rick doesn't know our names, only the numbers. After lunch, things got worse. A machine jammed on the west line, stopping work on 4 rows. Rick showed up 10 minutes later, furious. Who was running this? He demanded. A teenager named Lewis raised his hand. The belt just stopped. I think something's stuck under. Rick didn't let him finish. You think, you cost us 4 rows of fruit. Lewis backed up. I didn't touch anything. Now I've got to wait for a mechanic, and you're standing there like a statue, Rick shouted. Go home, don't come back. Lewis froze. Please, it didn't break it. I don't even know how this thing. You heard me, out. No one moved. Lewis looked around, but no one met his gaze. Rick turned to the rest. Anyone else want to argue? Get back to work. Graham stepped forward. That wasn't his fault. Rick's head swiveled. You want to go too? I'm just saying. I don't care what you're saying. You're new, you don't talk. Graham stared at him for a moment, then stepped back into line. Not yet. By mid-afternoon, word spread that Lewis had walked 5 miles back to town. A few of the older workers whispered about it, but no one dared speak louder than the wind. When the day finally ended, Graham lingered behind. He waited until Rick went into the office, then walked up to the side of the building. Through the cracked window, he saw Rick pouring whiskey into a coffee mug. A voice from behind startled him. You're not what you say you are. Graham turned. Hector stood there, arms folded. I don't know what you mean, Graham said. Your hands, they're too clean for someone who's done this long. Graham didn't answer. Hector stepped closer. You're not one of us, but you're watching. Why? Graham hesitated, then quietly said, because I built this company, and I didn't know it had become this. Hector blinked. You're the owner. Graham nodded once. Hector looked down at the dirt. So what now? I'm not walking away, Graham said, but I need to see everything, no filters. Hector nodded slowly. Then you need to see the housing. They left together, walking past the rows and toward a cluster of trailers behind the equipment shed. The air smelled like dust and rusted metal. Hector pointed to a few units stacked with pallets, their roofs patched with plastic sheets. Half the crew lives here. The rest are scattered in town or sleep in cars. Graham stepped toward one with a broken door. Inside, there was a mattress on the floor, a cooler filled with melted ice, and 2 fans pointed at a cracked window. This isn't legal, Graham said. No one's checking, Hector replied. Rick doesn't report anything. He says if we complain, he'll stop giving us hours. Graham walked to another trailer and peeked inside. A woman sat on the edge of a cot with a toddler in her lap, trying to fan him with a folded newspaper. He turned to Hector. How long has this been happening? Since Rick took over this site, 3 years ago. Before him, it wasn't easy, but it wasn't like this. Graham stood in silence, the weight of it all sinking deeper than exhaustion ever could. As he left, he passed by Gianna's trailer. She wasn't outside this time. A drawing had been taped to the door, a sun over a field, and a figure standing tall with a hat and a big red heart. Graham stared at it for a long time. He pulled out his phone and called a contact in HR. We need to talk, he said, today, quietly. He hung up and looked back once more at the trailers. He wasn't going back to the hotel. He was staying in the van tonight. Graham kept the van windows cracked through the night, trying to catch any hint of breeze. The upholstery reeked faintly of fertilizer, and the seat didn't recline all the way. He barely slept. Around 4, he heard footsteps crunching over gravel, 2 workers heading toward the field early to prep crates. They didn't speak. By 5, the lot was full again. Another day had started, and nothing had changed, not yet. He joined the crew as usual. Rick was already pacing near the shed, clipboard in hand, a Bluetooth earpiece dangling from his ear, though no one ever saw him take a call. His voice was loud again, but this time sharper, more clipped. Something was off. Lewis thinks he's clever. Rick muttered to a supervisor Graham hadn't seen before. Went crying to someone. Now I've got compliance breathing down my neck. The supervisor, a stocky man with a faded polo and a shaved head, didn't respond. He just nodded once and walked off toward the packing station. Graham picked up his basket and fell in line. Hector wasn't there today, neither was Gianna. He moved through the morning rows in silence, his limbs moving out of habit. The sun hadn't peaked yet, but the heat was already pressing in. He caught snippets of conversation. Someone's cousin had passed out at a different site. Another worker had their paycheck shorted with no explanation. At the break, Graham peeled away and walked behind the equipment shed, where a cluster of workers were sharing a bottle of lukewarm water. One of them, a man in his 50s with a limp, looked up. "You're the guy from yesterday," he said, "the one who spoke up." Graham nodded. "You got guts," the man said, "but it won't change nothing. Rick's been here too long, he knows how to make people disappear." "What do you mean?" "Ask Hector when he gets back, if he gets back." Graham's stomach tightened. What happened to him? The man shrugged. Saw him talking to someone from corporate last season. Next day, they cut his hours in half, went from 6 days a week to 2, just like that. Before Graham could press further, Rick's voice echoed from the other side of the shed. "Break's over, let's move." Halfway through the next block of rows, Graham saw a white SUV pull up near the office. 2 people stepped out, a woman in business attire holding a tablet, and a man in steel-toed boots with a safety vest. They didn't look like they belonged here. Rick walked over to meet them, arms wide like he was welcoming old friends. Graham kept his head low, but moved close enough to hear. "You know how it gets. People exaggerate," Rick said. "It's tough work, this isn't a resort." The woman didn't smile. "We're doing a full audit. Payroll, housing, safety, all of it." Rick's jaw twitched, but he nodded. "Sure, you'll see everything's in order." Graham kept walking. He wouldn't interfere, not yet. He needed to see how Rick handled pressure without knowing who was really watching. An hour later, the woman and the man walked through the field, speaking quietly with workers. Some avoided eye contact. Others were more direct. Graham heard one man say, "They docked me for a lunch I never took," and another, "We share gloves. No one gives us new ones." Rick trailed them at a distance, expression tight. By late afternoon, the temperature had climbed into the triple digits. A row worker collapsed near the irrigation trench. Graham rushed over, but Rick was already there, crouching beside the man. "You okay?" Rick asked, tone oddly pleasant. The man, young, maybe 20, nodded weakly but couldn't stand. Rick looked around, saw the auditors watching from across the field, and said loudly, "Get him some water. Make sure he's in the shade. We take care of our people." Graham stepped closer. "He's dehydrated. We need to get him out of the sun now." Rick stood and gave him a glare that said shut up, but his mouth said, "Of course. Let's get him a ride to the clinic." The man was lifted under the arms and walked to the far fence, but no one called a vehicle. Graham watched Rick turn away and say something under his breath to another supervisor. The injured worker was left sitting on a crate in the dirt, no umbrella, no shade. That was it. Graham pulled off his gloves and walked toward the office. He didn't stop when Rick called after him. "Where are you going?" Graham didn't answer. He stepped into the office, where the woman with the tablet was reviewing a housing document. The man in the vest looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked. Graham reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He showed her his ID. The man blinked, the woman straightened. "Mr. Ellis." "I've seen enough," he said. "Let's talk outside." They followed him out to the porch. Rick stood nearby, confused. "What's going on?" Rick asked. Graham turned to him. "My name is Graham Ellis. own this company. Rick's face went white. Wait, what? I've been working your field crew for 3 days. I've seen the way you treat people, the housing conditions, the safety violations, the way you talk to them, the way you ignore injuries. Rick stepped back. Look, I didn't know. No one told me you were coming. You weren't supposed to know, Graham said. That's the point. Rick's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the auditors. This is a misunderstanding. I've been doing everything by the book. No, you haven't, Graham said flatly. You've been cutting corners, intimidating workers, and pocketing the difference. I have testimonies, have footage, and I've lived it. Rick looked at the woman with the tablet. You can't take his word alone. We don't have to, she said. We've already documented 7 violations today. That's before the interviews. Graham turned to the man in the vest. Suspend his access, immediately. Rick stepped forward. You can't do that. I've run this location for 3 years. And you won't run it another day, Graham said. This isn't up for discussion. Security was called from the regional office. Rick was escorted off the property within 20 minutes. He didn't argue after that. He just walked to his truck and peeled out of the lot, tires scattering dust. Graham stayed on site. He met with each team in small groups, not as a boss, but as someone asking to understand. He heard about broken bathrooms, bounced checks, unfair firings. Every story added weight. He had Hector brought back the next day with full hours reinstated. The woman who'd been docked for tying her shoe was moved into a supervisor training program. Lewis returned, this time with a formal apology and a paid week off. Gianna came back as well. When she arrived, Graham met her at the gate. I saw the drawing, he said quietly. She looked down, embarrassed. Your son's talented, he added. I think he deserves a better place to grow up. She looked at him, cautious. What are you saying? We're fixing the housing, real units, electricity that works, no rent for field workers, and we're starting with your trailer. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, then offered her hand. Graham took it. That night, as the sun dipped below the fields, the crew gathered under a row of string lights that had been pulled from storage. Hector grilled vegetables on a rusted pit. Someone played music on a phone speaker. For the first time in weeks, people stayed after their shift. Graham didn't speak much. He just sat near the edge of the group, watching the workers laugh, eat, and stretch their legs without fear. A child ran barefoot across the dirt toward Gianna, holding a paper sun. He looked at the field beyond them, same earth, same crops, but everything felt different. Tomorrow there'd still be quotas, still be heat, still be hard work. But it would begin with dignity. And this time, he'd be watching. By the end of the week, Store 6 looked the same from the road, same sagging fence, same faded signage, but inside the gates everything had shifted. Graham returned, no longer in borrowed boots but with a clipboard of his own. Not to inspect, to listen. The field team had been reduced to a skeleton crew for the day, just enough to keep the urgent harvest moving while the rest were cycled through a paid pause to meet with HR, housing contractors, and safety coordinators. The changes had begun, but he stepped into the small break trailer that had rarely been used before. Now, it was stocked with bottled water and fans humming in the corners. There was a whiteboard listing the new crew leads. Gianna's name was at the bottom, under training track. She hadn't asked for it. Hector had nominated her. Graham found her near the back door, reviewing a laminated field map with one of the new safety hires. She looked up when he approached. Didn't expect you to be back today, she said. I don't expect to stop coming back, he replied. She nodded once, then gestured to the map. We marked the western rows for rotation. Soil's too soft for machines. We're flagging it now so no one sprains another ankle. He studied the chart. You think we need to keep them closed off? Not if we add ground mats. 60 feet each. It'll slow picking but reduce injuries. He turned to the safety officer. Get the mats ordered. If they hold the load, we'll deploy them site-wide. The man nodded and stepped out, already dialing. Gianna folded the map. Oren starts school next month. The new bus route comes past our trailer now. Graham leaned against the frame. Saw the list. You're approved for the next housing upgrade insulation, new unit, everything. She hesitated. You didn't have to do that. I didn't do it, you earned it. We're just catching up. She didn't answer, but her expression said enough. Outside, Hector was coordinating a crew of 5 to retrofit the shade nets. The old ones had been shredded weeks ago and never replaced. Graham walked over just as one of the younger workers, a lanky teen named Ezra, finished anchoring a corner. You're the guy who fixed the water lines, right? Graham asked. Ezra blinked, startled. Yeah, just patched the valve, was leaking bad. You do that on your own. No one else was gonna, didn't want people stepping in it. Graham looked at Hector. How's he been? Shows up early, doesn't complain, picks twice his quota. Graham nodded. Ezra, finish your shift, then meet me in the office. We're starting a maintenance apprentice program. You'll be the first. Ezra looked like he'd misheard. Me. You've got the initiative. Let's build on it. Ezra nodded slowly, then turned back to his work without saying more. Graham moved on. Inside the main office, the HR rep from headquarters, Lillian, was reviewing incident logs recovered from Rick's tenure. She didn't look up when he entered. We're up to 17 unprocessed injury reports, she said. 3 of them serious enough to justify workers' comp, none filed. We're issuing back pay and coverage quietly. Get legal on everyone, Graham said. No NDA, no threats, just make it right. She closed her laptop. There's one more thing. He waited. Rick hired a foreman last spring. Name's Devlin. We flagged him after pulling archived footage. He wasn't here the past few days, but he's back on shift tomorrow. What's the concern? She pulled up a still image. Devlin standing over a kneeling worker, shouting. The worker's hands were raised, palms out. He's known for targeting non-English speakers, threatened to cut hours if they didn't meet quota, mocked accents, mocked injuries. One woman said he kicked over her basket when she asked for gloves. Graham's jaw tensed. Why wasn't this reported? She tried. Rick deleted the file. Graham didn't hesitate. He's done. Terminate him now. No second chances. Lillian nodded. Already drafted. Outside, the air had shifted. Word had spread about the apprentice program, about the new housing inspections. Workers still moved carefully, but now they made eye contact. They asked questions. They took water breaks without flinching. By late afternoon, Graham walked the southern rows with a clipboard and no entourage. He passed a woman explaining harvesting angles to a new hire. He paused near a crate where 2 workers were sorting with slow, measured rhythm, the kind that came from knowing no one was about to scream at them. He found Hector near the irrigation valve, checking a pressure gauge. You good on labor for next week? Graham asked. Not yet, still short hands, but we're holding. How bad? Need 5 more full-timers, maybe 6. Graham took out a pen. You trust Ezra to lead a crew? Not yet, but by end of month, yes. All right, flag him for development. And if you need temps, run it through the new system only. No more side deals with the agency Rick used. Already deleted the contact. Graham nodded. If anyone gives you a hard time, vendors, suppliers, whoever, you come to me direct. Hector leaned back. You gonna do this at all 8 sites? All 8, and the packing warehouse in Fresno. I've already booked the first visit. Hector gave a quiet chuckle. You're gonna need better boots. I already ordered them. That evening, Graham didn't leave right away. He sat on the back porch of the admin building, watching the crews wrap up. A few kids played in the gravel lot while their parents signed out. Music drifted from a phone speaker again, but softer this time, like it belonged there. A man approached from the side, one of the site techs who'd stayed silent during the audit. "You fired Devlin." Graham nodded. The man's shoulders eased. "My cousin worked under him, quit last year, said he was never the same after. I'm sorry we didn't catch it sooner." "You caught it now." Graham stood and looked out over the field. The rows glowed gold in the fading light. "We'll still make mistakes," he said, "but now we'll answer for them." The man nodded and walked off. Graham stayed until the last truck pulled out of the lot. Then he walked the perimeter one more time, stopping at the trailer row where a contractor crew was finalizing measurements for the new units. He found Gianna standing nearby, hands on her hips. "The inspector said we'll have the new panel installed by Thursday," she said. "After that, they'll bring in the unit." "Good." She turned to him. "You're not just doing this for the audit score, are you?" "No," he said. "I'm doing this because forgot what it felt like to stand in this dirt, and I'm not making that mistake again." She considered him for a long moment, then said, "Oren wants to be a farmer now. Says he wants to grow strawberries that don't make people tired." Graham smiled at that. "Well," he said, "we'll need a lot more of those." As the sun dipped below the ridge, Graham walked to his truck. He paused before getting in, staring out at the rows. Same fields, same crop. Different future.